with Mike and Arif. And Arif, here we find ourselves back in the studio again. They've been bouncing us around quite a bit this year.
But this time we actually mean it. This time for sure, maybe we think possibly
we're here to stay?
For real to stay, we're going to be in studio. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Well, it's again putting on all clothing before we do the show. It's always a good thing anyways. It's professional. And
absolutely, yeah.
Going.
Just sets the tone, sets the pace for the day.
Sets the tone, and tone is what we're talking about a little bit here today, I think, and it is 2022. And the real estate market still, well, I wouldn't say in the last couple of weeks, I don't want to date the show, but there's been other things that have predominated in the headlights in the news. But real estate is our focus here, and certainly it's always a subject that comes up in the news. And one of the things that I think we see more and more is a lot of people who are current existing homeowners who may want to sell, may have been thinking they've got that dream home they want to move up to, or they maybe want to downsize, maybe just want to make a geographical move.
Yeah.
But they're frozen. A lot of people are feeling stuck, and it's because of that rapid increase in market activity or market prices that they see. It's created a kind of paralysis.
Yeah, well, it is an interesting place to be in the market right now, Mike, and I absolutely agree with you. If you look back over the last 2 years, the geniuses that we are, we made some predictions about what we might anticipate seeing in the market over the next couple of months, and whether that was people doing home renovations because they couldn't leave town, so to speak. They couldn't go to Europe, they couldn't go to Disneyland, et cetera. So a lot of people, took advantage of opportunities to improve their homes, et cetera. Great move. Then we saw the trend towards, well, listen, if people don't have to commute into Toronto and work out of the office in downtown Toronto, they're going to look to the suburbs. They're going to look to Milton. They're going to look to Whitby. They're going to look to Barrie and similar to relocate to get more home for the same price or less, or get out of renting and purchase for less, et cetera. And that, again, that happened. I think what we're looking at right now, Mike, is the fact that the people who were going to make the move, the people who were those first mover advantage, you hear about that, they've done that.
Yeah.
The people who were prepared to move or prepared to list their home and move out of Barrie or downsize in Barrie, they've done that.
Yeah.
The people who were also financially prepared, had their books in order, so to speak, they've also done that.
Yeah.
And so now that analysis that you're seeing, or that paralysis, is the other group, that other 95% who might be thinking about making the move.
The pent-up number of people who were in any of those categories have acted, is what you're saying, and those who are continuing to do it are just arriving at those realizations today, and that will continue to keep the market going with new listings. And I think we're going to see a continuation of activity coming from the GTA. That's a no-brainer. There's
absolutely
that price differential is going to keep demand there. I think a lot of the current sellers have probably taken that second look at the existing home and went, you know what? Yeah, let's go to Home Depot. Let's do the renos. And they're seeing the existing home through different eyes. They're finding a comfort level they didn't have before. We've been a society for the past 20 or 30 years here in Ontario, in central Ontario, where we move every 4 or 5 years. And that is the statistic, is on average, I think it's every 4 years. I'll bet you that number's changed when you factor in activities of the last couple of years.
Yeah, I would say to you, Mike, I think that we are creatures of habit as well. So there will always be the people who take advantage of, they're more the risk takers, if you will, in the world, whether that's buying the new latest phone, whether that's getting in on the .com boom before the bust, whether that's getting into Bitcoin. Those people who have that willingness to take a risk, or maybe they're in a position where they enjoy that's part of their, whatever you want to call it, their formula for success, is taking advantage of, I don't want to call it hysteria, but certainly the excitement, the nervous anticipation, and they made the first move, and that's great. Now that we've sort of seen how this happens, I think you're now going to see the more normalized response, and that more normalized response is, okay, well, wait a second, there are people who, maybe they're getting over asking, but we're going to see, we've been hearing about it from the central bank, we've been hearing about it from the pundits for a while, we're going to start to see rate increases, or we're going to start to see the bubble burst, for example. I personally don't believe that there's going to be a bubble that bursts.
No.
I think there's going to be a little bit of deflation in the over...
Yeah, a calming, I keep referring to it.
Right.
And And I just want to throw a cog in the wheel there a little bit, because we are in industries, each of us, where we tend to look to past performance to anticipate future direction. And I mean, it's, there's the old adage that, pay attention to the mistakes you've made or how does that go? If you've,
I missed that one. Sorry, Mike. I missed that one.
Oh boy, no, it's an old Einstein. Adage there.
To expect different results when you do the same thing.
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, exactly.
Definition of insanity, something like that. But past performance doesn't always determine future behavior, and that's a trap that I think a lot of us in my business have fallen into in the past few years, because when that presumes that all the dynamics remain the same.
Sure.
But the players change. And the boomers had one set of ideals and ambitions and goals. The Gen Xers had a different set. The millennials had a different set. So you can't always say that when A happens and B happens, it's going to equal C. And that's certainly what we've seen with regards to how the market's changed to bring us to where we are today. Nobody could have anticipated the flood from the GTA, because there were new parameters added in there. Technology is interfered.
I think that is an absolute truth, Mike, and we talked about that for a bit. This is not normal ebbs and flows. This is not normal patterns. It's not based solely in the economy. There has been an absolute game changer, and that is technology. It's not so much that the game changer was the pandemic. It was, but the pandemic was the catalyst for the change. The change is technology. The change is the industry in general, certainly legacy thinking corporations of the way this is how we've always done it. The pandemic triggered what was going to come anyway, probably in 20, 30 years from now, or maybe 5, who knows, right? But the pandemic triggered the actual change being technology.
And what I wanted to introduce to that is the media is certainly infamous for this, and that is they always look to the past. They're the ones, who've been calling for a bubble, and because they go by past performance. When something goes up, it's going to come down. So they've been predicting things are going to come down for 20 years in the real estate market, but they've continued up. Realtors are responding much the same way, and that's dangerous. And I think when we get into the second and third segments, focusing on buyers and sellers, I'm going to point out some areas where our behavior patterns, our routine type of responses and actions as realtors really don't cut it as they used to. And we'll get into detail on that later. But certainly we haven't just seen your typical traditional boom period, like the spring market that always returns to a quieter market, and you could follow that every year. That on the chart, it would do the same thing. We've seen a lot of new dynamics introduced here, which there is no formula that has an equation at the end of it that we can predict at this point. So.
Yeah, Mike, I think if we look at some of the data and if we look at some of the patterns that we were talking about, you were looking at an average home price not so long ago, call it less than 10 years ago, you're looking in the high 300,000s.
Yeah. Not even that.
Maybe not even that.
I just posted to my Facebook page. I was showing it to you before we started, and it was an interview in this room when they did a news show from this room talking about the market, and the commentator was saying all indicators are, word is out that we're going to be in for a quieting of the market and a price drop. Yeah. And I was going against that, and I was saying, I can't see it happening, and my call was right. But we were talking numbers, 300,000 for an average price.
And that's just it. We're encroaching on $1 million in less than 10 years, going from the 300s to $1 million. Here's the thing, one of the comments that you made, though, is that people are looking at either selling and repurchasing in the same market or selling and downsizing in the same market. But selling and even downsizing in the same market when that house price has gone up by 100% over 4 or 5 years, and your income hasn't, there's also the new dynamic.
That's
right?
what people don't consider, because you can go, well, it doesn't matter, the house you're buying went up, but so did the house you're selling. But yes, you're still needing to qualify for a mortgage for the remainder of that value on the house.
So are you suggesting that that's part of the hesitancy as to why the available inventory in the market is down?
I would say if people are thinking it through even that far, then for sure. But I think before people even get to crunching the numbers, just the sight of the numbers themselves go, this market's too scary. I think there's a lot of people there as well who are thinking, if I just hold out, that house that I'm going to be moving into may go down in value. Not
when was the last time that happened?
The one I'm then making that thought from is also going to go down in value if that happens. But again, when has that ever happened? And it's unlikely to happen in the future. But what will happen, I believe, is you're in, say, an $800,000 home today. You want to downsize to a condo that, say, is $450,000, just for numbers. The demand for that $450,000 condo is higher than the demand for your $800,000, $900,000 home. So as the market quiets, chances are that calming is going to impact on the higher priced homes sooner than it's going to impact on the lower. So you're in a better position today to sell at that peak price and buy at the price that that condo is, because chances are it's going to continue upwards in value at a higher rate as things are calming.
So what is the cost benefit, or what is your return on investment? Let's say you have to come out a little bit out of pocket, or you think that you might be ahead if you wait a couple of months to a half a year to a year, and then that doesn't happen. If you made the move today, based on the numbers that you're seeing, and whether you're predicting, Mike, that we're going to go from 15% year over year down to about 5% year over year, that cost or that savings that you make by making the move now, yes, you might give up a little bit money in the short term, but is it going to be in the equity?
Well, it's going to be
going to see
your savings will begin immediately in terms of your monthly costs are likely to be going down. Mortgage, utility costs from going from a larger home to a condo or a smaller home or a townhome, whatever it may be. And yes, that home you're selling is going to continue to appreciate, but I think we're past that point where that's as significant a consideration as it might have been any time in the past 5 years. A home that you bought for $400,000 5 years ago could be back on the market today for $850,000 to $9,000 in all likelihood. That's been a good investment. You put $50,000 down on that, you're coming away very well. Can you expect that same performance in the next 5 years? Not likely. Will you still earn some equity on that home? You may earn a six-figure equity on that, anywhere from $75,000 to $150,000 if increases return to more traditional year-over-year increases. You're still going to have a good investment. You're still going to, but I don't think I think anybody who's betting on the real estate market with expectations of performance like we've seen in the past 2 years is setting themselves up for
So comparison is dangerous. Comparison's the root of all evil. Mike, we do have to go to break. When we come back from the break, though, let's actually continue the topic around some comparison and look into some of those numbers that you're talking about, whether you bought and held or whether you also comparing apples to apples and how much money you were putting down and what the carrying cost would be. This is, to me, a fascinating subject if you're a numbers type of person, but we hope you'll stay with us on the other side of this break. We'll be back with more of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV Barrie. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV Barrie. Mike, before the break, we were talking about, well, really the natural inclination of people to sort of look at the past and sort of, judge what tomorrow is going to look like based on past performance. And, well, I'm not going to say it's a dangerous thing to do. It's not. Let's not get carried away. But it may or may not be the wisest move. Why? Because we've added some new factors into the formula, into the equation, which changes things up. So you're not really using the right apples to apples data when looking at your decisions.
They're different apples.
Exactly.
So, there are different variables that come into play, and I think that's what gets forgotten many times. It's good to look to past performance and look for patterns, and have that in the back of your head as one eventuality or possibility, but you can't count on it being an inevitability. It's not certain that that's going to happen. And certainly the way our current market is, and because so many things are new variables, I find it makes it that much harder to predict what's going to happen going forward.
So Mike, here's the interesting thing from my perspective. We're all humans, right? And none of us alive today have really gone through something that we're going through right now, where there's been such a wholesale change in that equation, in the formula. And I'm going to say this with absolute respect to all players in the market, whether you're a buyer, whether you're a seller, whether you're new to the market, whether you're a mortgage agent, or whether you're a real estate agent. None of us have really been in this scenario before.
Yeah.
And those of us who are making these decisions or trying to provide guidance or prediction based on past performance, that includes the mortgage agents and the realtors if we're not careful, right? And so your thoughts on the industry and us as professionals, who's providing guidance? Are we also falling into that category of erroneously using past data?
Well, if we are going to truly use past performance, you talk about world events such as pandemics. If we look to history, we had a pandemic in 2019. There was one in the mid-1800s. On the heels of those pandemics, we had 10, 20 years of people just living life like there was no tomorrow, partying. The Roaring 20s came on the heels of what was the pandemic, 2019,
the Spanish flu.
Spanish flu, of course.
Yeah.
So, and whatever the one was, mid-1800s, there was that same reaction.
Don't ask me to keep going. History's not my
thing. Yeah, okay.
Are we
going to see COVID come to an end and see everybody dancing in the streets like the Roaring 20s again? Who knows? It's hard to say.
I do think you're seeing that a little bit. You're definitely seeing people who are, whether it's losing patience or basically just saying, oh, at last, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. And that's not an unreasonable reaction to make. But as it goes back into real estate and as it goes back into making these, life-altering judgments, if you will, these judgment calls, whether it's to get out of rental into home ownership, whether it's to downsize, whether it's to move to a new market. Some of the things that we have to keep in the back of our mind is that there are still some constants, and those constants are that unless you're coming in with a cash purchase, you are going to be required to qualify.
There's checks and balances that are going to keep it in line.
So I think quite rightly people are paying attention, maybe a little bit more than they were a few months ago, and maybe these are some people who have realized, maybe some of the people who've held back on listing their home for sale are people who realized, I tried and it didn't work. I tried to sell and I realized I didn't qualify for my next purchase, and whatever that may be. The banks are still going to do their due diligence checks. Are you employed? Did you ever, even once in the last 2 years, collect a CERB payment? Depending on the bank, that may be a deciding factor for whether or not you qualify.
And a lot of people may not be returning to the same jobs they were in at the beginning of the pandemic, and a change of jobs can impact, as you know full well.
Did you defer a payment? Did you defer a payment on your credit card? Did you defer a payment on your car payment or something like that? So these are things that people must be mindful of, and I think that some people are starting to realize that impacted their life.
I know it frustrated you, but those options were being offered to people without fully telling them what the repercussions may be further down the road on their credit.
In my opinion, it's a huge black eye, if you will, on the industry, whether it's the credit card issuers or the finance issuers of a vehicle payment, or whether it's the bank. There are a number of instances where people did accept that deferment of a payment and didn't realize that it was going to show as a missed payment. It doesn't necessarily show as a bad missed payment. It shows that a payment wasn't made, and then instantly the financial institutions and the underwriters took that as a reason to either not qualify you or put you in a higher risk bracket, and therefore you paid a higher interest rate, which lo and behold, if you're watching the news, you're seeing that the banks are, even the CIBCs of the world are saying, highest ever profits earned in the last quarter, which just makes me really quite sick to see that. So
well, we see that each and every year, but that's a whole other show, and we can go and
we probably will
tear into them. Yes. The other thing that is always in the news, and a term that's always used, is with regards to the market, talking about supply and demand. We talk about it on the show, and we've been talking about it all along, how there's an imbalance there, where there's more demand than there is supply. And for most people, including myself, it gives the impression, well, there just haven't been homes for sale. But I was looking through historical data just for the past couple of years, and what caught my eye was that in 2021, there were more homes sold than in 2020 in the Barrie area. In 2020, there were more homes sold in 2019, the year before the pandemic. So in each of the last 3 years, home sales have actually gone up. But then you go on to Realtor.ca on your computer and you see a very limited inventory of homes for sale, and you go, well, how do those two things correlate with one another? And I was scratching my head too, and then it dawned on me, the reason we're not seeing the inventory is not because there isn't that flow of homes coming up for sale and selling. It's the fact that those homes traditionally, prior to this last heat wave that we've been seeing in the market, a house would come on and would stay on for 3-4 weeks, maybe 6 to 8 weeks even before it would sell. So inventory would accumulate on the market. You'd drive through neighborhoods, you'd see for sale signs everywhere. Today, a home comes onto the market, there's a good chance it's going to have an offer on it within 24 to 48 hours and be sold within a week. So the homes don't stay on the market. So when you open up Realtor.ca, you're not seeing that home that was just sold in the last 24 hours that was listed 48 hours ago. They're gone. So the illusion is that there isn't the homes being sold, but the reality is any particular snapshot of the market is just showing you what's active in that moment. And that leads into what we're going to talk about again.
Well, Mike, this reminds me of, though, when you look at people who would be either day traders or playing the market, and they'd call their rep and they'd say, hey, listen, when this stock hits this number, buy, or when this stock hits this number, sell. I know that realtors have the ability to put some criteria into their CRM so that when something comes up, it can automatically trigger a message to a potential buyer or potential seller. So I have to presume that the same thing's happening. I remember not so long ago, let's call it 2 years ago, that realtors would get on a bus and do a tour together and talk about all the new homes that are about to hit the market.
Yeah,
and they'd give each other a sneak peek. That's not happening, clearly.
No.
So things aren't hitting Realtor.ca necessarily, that they're being sold either from people already in your CRM or the question is, though, Mike, is it locals buying local, or who's actually buying the home before it hits the market? Is it still people coming up from the GTA? What's going on?
I think if you're working with a good realtor, they're keeping an eye and they're in contact with other realtors and are networking, so they're learning. You're another realtor in my office or another office, so I bumped into, I'm going to say, hey, I've got someone coming up, they're looking for this, this, and this. They may say, I've got a house coming up, just a heads up, this, this, and this. So oftentimes a deal could be done before. The downside of that in this market is you're going to, we might get a good offer on a home, but you're missing out on that opportunity to put it on the market, see if you can get into that scenario where you're going to get the multiple bids and perhaps get an even better offer with the public. So I think those backroom deals, pre-list deals, are happening less and less now. People want to get their home out there onto the market.
So the question is, if the deal is happening before it goes to Realtor.ca, and they are selling to somebody who's already been sitting in the wings waiting for it to happen, typically speaking, that's going to be a cash offer or an offer without any conditions. Is the seller actually getting the best, right? And I know that this is going to irk some people who are saying housing prices are out of control. I can't buy one for myself. Why are you celebrating this? I'm not celebrating it. The question is the seller getting the best deal if it doesn't hit Realtor.ca?
We're going to get into that in the in that third segment.
Teaser alert.
Because third and fourth segment. Third, we'll focus on those sellers and the details there. I just don't want to be
sorry, folks. You're going to have to wait, get some popcorn or a coffee refill. But
that's a teaser. But let's get into that in a little more
and I think it's worth talking about.
I wouldn't do it justice with a quick.
Fair enough.
Second segment answer. So
fair enough. So basically speaking, though, what you are saying is, again, that dynamic has shifted the way that we're doing. But what about virtual tours or virtual open houses versus open houses? Is there time for an open house right now when you're seeing things happening like that?
Well, obviously, pandemic and restrictions kind of limited open houses for the past couple of years. So people aren't getting that ability to just drive around on a Saturday or Sunday with their coffee and pop into the open house here and there. They're still going through with their agents, booking that showing and getting in and looking at the home physically. And most people do want to physically see the home, but more and more people are buying homes sight unseen, because of the pandemic, but also because of the technology we have now for those agents who are utilizing that technology. And all of us should be, I think, but we aren't all doing that.
But you're saying if you drive through a neighborhood, Mike, if you drive through a neighborhood right now, you may not be seeing as many homes for sale, but the market still is flowing.
The market is flowing. Yeah, there are fewer homes listed at any given time. But I think the activity levels, at least the data shows that homes are selling. They're just selling quickly. So you don't, see that same home on your drive home with the for sale sign for 6 to 8 weeks and wondering if it's ever going to sell. Or oftentimes in a slower market, then you see the name on the sign has changed too, because it's the agent's fault that it didn't sell, not the market's fault. It always is. And nowadays, if you do see the sign on the lawn, chances are if you just went and did a drive for the next 10 minutes, any of the signs you see, if you saw 10 signs, at least 9 of them are going to be sold signs on the lawn.
Oh, and that is absolutely true. That is true. Listen, Mike, I do want to get into that next segment. I do want to talk about some things that, for me, I think, again, fascinating, certainly as a numbers person. Also, we're going to talk about, how far does your money go today compared to yesterday, and what happens when you play with the numbers in terms of qualification. Let's also talk about the impact of interest rates, et cetera. So I do want to go to break, but when we come back, you know what? I think there's definitely more to talk about. I think we're covering some good ground for people who are wondering, should they get into the market? Should they reconsider selling now or downsizing now, et cetera? So I think that this is a great topic to keep up with. Stay with us. On the other side of the break, there will be more from Mike and me on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we're talking about the real estate market here in 2022, and there's a lot of changes, you got to admit.
Absolutely. A lot of changes, a lot of things to get used to, both for those who are the professionals working in the industry and those who are trying to time the market for themselves, make the best move for themselves. And that's really what it does come down to. For some people, it's a decision that needs to be made out of necessity, if you will, and for others, it is a decision that's being made out of, how can I make the most of the situation for myself, right?
Yep.
So this is interesting. And how are you timing that market?
Well, that's key, and timing is a key component of everything. And I want to talk a bit about being a realtor in 2022. One needs to up their game quite a bit, and they should be. Because we talked earlier about how, doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results, how that's not a good thing.
Well, what is a best practice, though, Mike?
Well, a best practice, there are the standards that don't change in any market. Always be there for your client, always be thinking forward, always be looking out for their best interests, and be responding quickly. But the quickly part is more important than ever right now. And let's focus for this segment on if you are a seller. Right now, if you're a realtor, if it's your first day or your 20th year in the business, you can list and sell a home. The market is going to get that home sell. And a temptation could be created there for the realtor to do the minimum. Just put the house on the MLS, go in, take a handful of pictures, get it up.
Let's be honest, Mike, there are people who are still asking the question, in this day and age, why do I need a realtor? Or why am I paying for all those extra frills and bells and whistles, et cetera? The house is selling within 24 hours. Exactly. Why would I need that?
Well, is the most important thing that the house sells? No, because it is going to sell. The most important thing to you as the homeowner should be, is my house gonna sell for the highest and best price in this market? And I think too many listings are probably selling where they're leaving money on the table, and that's the seller's money that's being left on the table because the things aren't being done that should be. And I'd like to walk through some of the things in 2022 a realtor needs to be doing to get top dollar for that listing.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, one of the questions, though, is am I selling to somebody locally within the market, or am I selling knowing that I'm likely going to have somebody come from outside the market who is differently qualified? I don't want to say better qualified, okay, fill in the blanks yourself, but differently qualified. Maybe they're walking in with fewer conditions. And I think that in itself is a challenge, certain for people in the market here who want to compete for something in this market here as well, when they have other people who may be coming at, could be perceived as an unfair advantage. Well, I think we got to take that out of our thinking.
Well, you're the seller. You're selling your home. I don't think when you're sitting down at the table planning with your family, you're looking at numbers. We need this amount, our house worth this amount. You're not saying, do we want to be sure that our home sells to a Barrie native, or do we want to eliminate offers and bids from people outside of Barrie? I don't think that enters into the equation. And the lion's share of buyers that are out there are coming from outside of the Barrie market. And many of them are selling homes for $1.5, $2 million. They have the capital to come in and bid on a home and get into the bidding wars and bid the price of that home up. And they're the ones that are driving local prices up. It's unfortunate for that local buyer because it leaves them out,
hey, listen, I'm a local buyer.
Well,
I'm a local buyer as well.
I'm not getting into a 100,000 over list bidding war with anybody anytime soon on a home. It's so that's unfortunate. It's sad. It is a reality. It's not the realtor that's causing that. It's not. It's just the market conditions that are causing that. Because our job is to get the highest and best price for our seller. We have no choice but to do that.
I'm gonna do something that I haven't done that I'm aware of before.
Oh my goodness! Can it be done on television?
Well, I think so. Here goes.
Okay.
And that is to address the elephant in the room around the term misinformation. There are people out there who are saying it's people, whether it's landlords are bad people, or sellers are bad people, or realtors are bad people. Listen, what determines the market?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What determines the market is there is somebody with a need and there is someone with the ability to fill that need. Whether you have a need to sell and there's a willing buyer, or whether you have a need to buy and there's a willing seller. Yeah. That's what determines the market. You can complain all you want about how unfair it is or whatever. Okay, I'm going to empathize with you, but the reality is it fair? Is it right? Would you be doing your job under the code of ethics that you follow, or would a seller be doing their job under whatever conditions they're working under to say, I in fact am not going to sell reasonably to the highest bidder? Now, reality is that you might sell to somebody for a few dollars less if the closing date or conditions line up better for you.
If you're looking at other elements for value, other than the dollar, But it's a free market, and free market does not work the way you've suggested there, and that's that's the downside of it. Unfortunately, is it creates winners and losers, and people are frustrated, and rightfully so, if they feel like they're chasing something they're never going to catch up to, and when people are frustrated and they can't resolve it, they look to assign blame.
Yeah, but now what you're saying, though, is you're saying that there are probably some realtors out there who would say, hey, listen, I can turn around houses in 24 hours. I'm not going to bother with the drone footage. I'm not going to bother with the virtual tour. I'm not going to. And by the way, it is quite likely that you're not just listing on the local market here, but you're also listing on the Toronto market.
Let's get into that.
Okay.
And the unfortunate thing is the seller may not even know that they have not received the highest and best service. They're just happy the house is sold fast. They're happy with their agent. But here's the things that needs to happen. If you want to just get your home sold, fine. Get the realtor who's going to give you the discount, who's going to put it on the MLS, take a bunch of pictures, and be done with it. Your home needs to be exposed on the Barrie database real estate board for all local Barrie realtors. It needs to also be exposed on the TREB database. I'm a member of both boards, so I do that. Any realtor today should be a member of both boards, in my opinion, because that's where a lot of the activity is coming from. The 75, 80,000 TREB member realtors are the ones representing those buyers who are coming into our region. So you need that exposure. You need to be on.
TREB is a Toronto Real Estate Board?
Toronto, it's now TRREB. It's Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. And
kind of like our hospital. Okay.
Yeah, so you need that exposure, and if you're not giving that exposure to your clients, if you're a client out there, ask your agent, what boards are you on? Are you going to have my listing on both? Because I think that is key in this market. Yes, you want pictures of the house. I mean, that's a gimme, but 25, 30 pictures will suffice. I bring that professional photography team. They take 50 to 75 high definition images. They go into slideshows. We do the video tours, the virtual tours. Those virtual tours and images get their own website on there, as well as going onto my website and onto social media and onto hundreds of other
So utilizing
websites.
digital media is replacing the walkthrough as best you can, or at least you shortlist it.
And that video walkthrough, that drone shot, and some may roll their eyes at that, but that people want to be able to place that place in the neighborhood.
Yep.
That's key. It looks good. It stands out. There's something out there now called a Matterport 3D tour, and what this is it literally gives you the ability to go onto your computer and walk yourself through a house with images and turn every which way, up, down, left, right, and you're literally walking through that house on your computer. And with that, I also provide a set of plans, of drawings for the house, floor plans for the house. How many realtors are doing that? And people go, well, you don't need to do that. But yes, it costs money, but yes, it's an added service, and it's something that sets that home apart from that one and that one and that one. It may encourage that one extra bid that's going to push that value up a little bit higher. And that's what you got to do if you want to get highest and top dollar.
I think that anybody who's been paying attention to the market knows that marketing is a huge factor in there. Yeah. Yes, it is. I mean, you're not changing the house, but marketing is showcasing the value add. What is the value proposition of you purchasing this home? Versus, so you're marketing the neighborhood. Yeah. You're marketing.
But first, you have to create the enhanced product to market. I mean, I encourage all of my clients to have their home stage. I'll pay for it for them. And find me another agent that's paying for the staging for their clients. It's important to have that home stage. Not everybody. Some people's homes show like Better Homes and Gardens on a day-to-day basis, but not all of us have a home that looks that way. And it may be just a few simple things that need changing in there that's going to make the home stand out in the pictures, in the video, in the 3D tour. And then you've got something to market. And once you market that and you get it out in front of as many eyeballs as you can, and you get those multiple bids coming in, and you get the return for your client that's $50,000 to $100,000 above the realtor who's just throwing the pictures on the MLS. And
now that being said, now I want to talk about the buyer just for a second here. I mean, or even the seller actually, as far as that's concerned. One of the things that I always share with my clients is that once you've made a decision, and take a second. Now, timing is going to be everything, right? You cannot afford to wait anymore a week or take it home and have a conversation. If you are serious about moving, and we know that homes are going to turn over the moment they hit the market, within hours of hitting the market, if you wait too long, you're done. So we do need to get into the fact, and maybe we'll have this in the next conversation or in the next segment, but we'll talk about prepping yourself in terms of qualification. But once you make a decision that you're going to sell, or once you make a decision that you're going to buy, when you hesitate, it can be gone, right? So, so I think you've got to decide, a buyer or a seller has to decide, this is the number that I am peaceful with in terms of peace of mind. Because you start second guessing, or you start going, oh shoot, I should have waited. There's a lot of should haves out there. In every scenario, whether you're a buyer or a seller, there are a lot of should haves out there. You've got to decide what number works for you, and then do it.
Yeah,
as far as I'm concerned.
And it's a fast-moving boat now, and that's part of we talked in the first segment about the hesitation, and should have touched more on that, and the fact that people are scared of the scenario. Okay, I get that offer within the first 24, 48 hours. Now I've got to find that house out there. And that's when you need that realtor who knows how to work, top professional for you as a buyer. And that's what we'll talk about a bit more in the last segment here is, the things you need to do to be successful in this market as a home buyer.
As a home buyer.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. So what are you seeing though, Mike, just before we go to break, because we should do that in just a moment here, but what are you seeing in terms of sellers? Are they staying locally? Are they renting? Are they downsizing? What are they doing?
What I'm seeing is the local sellers, more and more of them, are selling here to move to another region. Oftentimes, I'm seeing people are moving to the East Coast. People are downsizing to smaller places. That's happening. But more and more, we're seeing the people that are just selling here and moving Midland, Penetang, Wabashin, Washago, Parry Sound. They're stepping out into less expensive markets and being able to capitalize on that. Now they've got a smaller mortgage, they've got some equity in the bank that they can now use to take their family to Disney World or the Epcot Center or whatever they want to do. You're seeing a lot more of that happening now too.
Interesting. So when we come back from the break, Mike, let's go to break right now. When we come back, let's talk about the buyer in this equation. And let's talk about making sure, because if you've only got a couple of minutes to make that decision, what do you need to do to make sure that you're well prepared to go in with confidence and come out victorious on that offer? So we'll be right back, right on the other side of this break, with more of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. Stay with us. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. And Mike, we're talking about something that, you know, almost requires a wizard or the 1-900 number to determine,
yes,
you know, what's the right price and am I going to win the bid, right?
Exactly.
It is a little bit out there.
Let's open up a hotline.
You know what? I think we should do that. It's a great business idea. We'll talk after the show about that. Yeah. But we've been talking about the seller a lot and you know, perceived value, for example. I mean, homes that not so long ago were in the 3s and 4s are now encroaching in or over the $1 million mark. And so now we got to talk about the buyer, right? Because whether you're a local buyer or whether you're a buyer coming from out of market, the reality is you've got a very short window.
Yeah.
So how do you know? I mean, how many times do you have somebody sitting in the car or on Zoom with you or whatever it might be where you're looking at now 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 homes before you actually land a bid? And what is the common theme with that, Mike, that you're finding?
Well, you're looking at far fewer homes now, and part of that is because of the technology that is available now. You're allowed to know so much more about that home before you ever step in the front door. You know, the listings that have all the features that I talked about in the last segment, you know, the virtual tours and you know, the homework's been done that you can learn about that home. So you can narrow your field down quite a bit before you go out and actually physically look at homes.
This is not new, by the way, Mike.
No.
Certainly in the last few years, whether you're buying a TV, whether you're buying a car, whether you're buying something that you normally would buy at a local electronic shop, whatever it might be, people are better educated. Digital media, the digital space has allowed for a better qualified, better educated purchaser, right?
That's been one of the upsides of that for sure. But as a buyer, how many homes are you seeing? You're seeing fewer homes. You're putting bids on more homes in all likelihood than you ever were before. It used to be you shopped till you found the house you liked, and you either got it or you didn't. And if the fact that you did or didn't get it was usually based on the conditions and price that you put into that offer. If you're
so, Mike, is that a smart move, though? Are buyers settling for the home they can get? Is that actually what's happening, or what's happening?
That's probably happening to some degree. Is I think your expectations, you have to curb them a little bit because again, at any given moment, there's less inventory available to you. There may be less time to think things through, so you got to quickly come to a decision. And you know, you can't be shopping for a home. And I say this to both the buyer and the realtor, you can't be shopping for homes like it's 2015 and expect the results that you want, the results being finding that home and getting that offer accepted. In 2015, your realtor sent you some listings to review. You know, you saw one you liked, you called them up the next day and told your realtor, can you book a showing for Thursday or on the weekend, and we'll go have a look. Nowadays, I tell all my clients before we go out you need to be thinking like a firefighter on call. The alarm sounds, you get that call, there's a listing you want to see. You got to call your realtor right away and say, hey, that listing you just sent me that just came on the market, get me in there tomorrow by noon. You get in there, you see it. If it hits all the buttons that you need, you get right to work on an offer. Because if you stall 24, 48 hours, chances are the agent's going to call up and say, I want to book a showing. We've accepted an offer on that. Even when agents are saying, well, we're holding off until next Sunday to look at offers, most people will still take a preemptive offer if it's a good offer. So if you're not in there early, chances are you're missing out on most of the opportunity that's there.
So there are some interesting things that I'm noticing. There are those who are doing a renovation and selling their home and getting a premium from the renovation. And then there's those who are saying, I don't need to do the renovation. I'm still going to get the premium for selling my home, and somebody else can buy it and personalize it themselves. And I think that that's really important from a buyer's perspective. You got to go in knowing what your magic number is going to be, and when that magic number is considered, that magic number has to include the renovation that you might likely do to the home that you buy. So from my perspective, buy the neighborhood. By the neighborhood, by some of the structural constraints that you need, whether it's 4 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, whatever that may be.
The bones,
buy those
the basics.
Things, buy the bones, and then personalize it. But
well,
Mike,
and that's good advice from both ends for both the buyer and the seller. Is that house that does have the few fix-its and a little bit of flash and glitter added? It's the home that more often than not is going to be in that more ambitious bidding war. So as a seller, yes, you definitely want to do that. As a buyer, perhaps you want to consider that when you're looking at homes, that the one that maybe needs a little bit of work that you can do yourself. For every dollar you spend doing it yourself, you can expect to spend $2 or $3 more if it's been done by the seller and put into that bidding scenario.
So. So one of the codes, Mike, that I need to live by is really this. It's one thing to get you into the house. It's another thing for me to make sure that you can afford to stay in the house.
Well, yes.
Yeah, and so a lot of people will fall for the marketing strategy that says it's cheaper to own than it is to rent these days. Yeah, maybe. But maybe not, because
but harder to get in.
Harder to get in. Well, one, you have to have the down payment for sure, but you also need to be able to carry the cost of home ownership. If you are renting, this is not an us versus them scenario, but if you are renting, you are likely not paying the property tax. It might be factored into your rent, but you're not physically paying the property tax. You're also not physically paying for the renovations or the upgrades of the major infrastructure.
When the tree falls on the
system,
roof, and
something like that. So when you are buying, it's one thing to get in, it's another thing to make sure that you can put money aside in your budget. It may not be on your mortgage application, it may not be on your qualification form, but it better be in yours. It has to be in your own personal formula for household expenses.
You need a reserve fund there.
You need one
for your home, because there's any and every possibility of something happen.
So in terms of guidance and advice, Mike, I know that you like it when people who call you and say that they'd like to do business with you, that you say, well, are you already qualified? I think a lot of things have changed.
It's not enough anymore.
It's not enough anymore.
No.
Some of those constraints that we talked about earlier in the show, they remain hard, fast, and true. You are going to have your history looked at. So whether you missed that payment or you skipped a payment or whatever, even if it was allowed, even if it was offered, it does not change the fact that it will be considered by the person deciding for you whether or not you're going to get the loan. It's going to be considered.
And that's a frustration, because no matter how prepared you want to be financially, if you're borrowing funds to buy a house, no lender is going to say you absolutely qualify for the mortgage. They can tell you up to a certain amount what you may qualify for. And I would tell any buyer, sit down with your lender, look them in the eye and say, if I buy this house tomorrow for X number of dollars with this much down, how much can you put towards?
Well,
you need to know that number before you ever set out to look at homes.
You're wasting your own time, you're wasting the realtor's time. The worst thing that can happen is that you go in without conditions and you find out you didn't get the money, and now all of a sudden you're obligated to somehow find a way to close that deal. So whether you're getting another co-signer on or whether you're getting into private money, here's something that I think is really important, by the way. The reason why, in my opinion, pre-qualification's garbage, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't at least go in and get your numbers checked with the person that you're working with, mortgage broker, mortgage agent that you're working with. You absolutely must, but do not take a pre-qualification as gospel. It's not. Because getting qualified for, let's use the round number right now of $800,000. I might be a little bit conservative on that number these days, but let's use that number of $800,000. $800,000 on a house that the market and an appraisal would determine is worth $1 million. a bank might enjoy that deal. They might
sure.
say that that's a great
Good
deal.
luck finding that, and let me know when you see that.
I will. I'll let you know after I bought it. But then at the same time, $800,000 on a home that's only worth $700,000
in the eyes of the appraiser.
In the eyes of the appraiser, in the eyes of the bank who's going to look to the appraiser for that value, right? You're not getting the money on that.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the loan.
Up to that amount, you're going to have to make up the difference.
You're going to have to make up the difference. So it is a caution that I offer. We might be not at odds as a realtor and a mortgage broker, but I am very cautious and very determined to tell my clients, you need to make sure that you don't get too carried away in the emotion of needing to win that battle of the bidding war.
Yeah.
Because you still, at the end of the day, have to get the money to pay for it.
And certainly you don't want to be going in waiving your financing condition because your banker has told you, you're absolutely going to qualify for funding. The house still has to qualify.
The house has to qualify.
That's something that people forget. And I've seen that happen too many times where it looks like it's a done deal, and then the appraisal comes in and the appraisal is $700,000 and the house is sold for $800,000, and you've got to make up a difference.
I think it's really good guidance to let people know if you are looking to buy a house and you're getting into the market, don't necessarily go for the end result. Don't buy the forever home. Get in the market. If you're looking to get in the market. Because once you're in, you have an instant savings account called appreciation. That'll help you transition and step to the next down.
And you can always build value into the home too.
I like three-step processes. I like letting people know, I don't want you to buying a house and then you hate life from now until whenever your marriage falls apart or whatever it might be. You don't need that stress. Get in the market and go in steps.
Well, I always say it's a ladder, home ownership ladder. And you get in the first home, you don't necessarily fall in love with it, but it provides you shelter and it provides you the basics, and it's an education process.
Make it yours.
And you build equity that takes you to the next rung of the ladder and so forth.
Absolutely.
And I've seen so many people do quite well by being patient, and over 10, 15 years go from that bottom rung up to they're living in their dream home today. Took a long time, but they got there because they got in early and they were persistent.
So Mike, I wanted to throw this out there though, because you'd mentioned something that the difference between, and I don't think we have a lot of time left, so the difference between winning the bid and not winning the bid sometimes isn't the price itself, sometimes it's humanizing it and that personal touch.
Humanizing,
thoughts on that?
Personal touch? Well, talk about that. Like, I always encourage my buyers to include a cover letter with them. Tell you what I like about your home, what I like about your neighborhood, a little bit about me and my family, why we'd like to be here. I have kids who are going to the college. If you can, if your offer is one of many on the table and suddenly yours has a face to it, it's not just a number, that can make the difference oftentimes. But again, we talked about, just to summarize, be sure you got those financing in place. You're going to qualify for a mortgage before you go out there. Shop for homes within your affordability range. And I would add to that, if you're qualified, you have $50,000 to put down, and the bank has guaranteed you $750,000. Doesn't mean you should be shopping for $800,000 homes.
No, it doesn't.
You'll get your bid in.
We got to go.
And you're going to lose.
We could do this forever, but we got to go. But I've enjoyed this, Mike. Thanks for this conversation, and I hope you got something out of it. We'll see you next time on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif.